Continuing from the Batman Year 1 video I did last year, now let's get to the story Frank Miller did before it to put himself on the map. The Dark Knight Returns is one of the Batman stories that has been inspiring the modern writing for Batman stories to the point where most people from hardcore fans to people like me who have toned down my enthusiasm in liking the character in having come to agree that it has been going somewhat too far. The comic came out in 1986 when Frank Miller was 31, aka younger than me right now at 32 at the time of the writing, and back then Frank Miller saw that he had become older than Batman. So he wanted to make an old man Batman story to compensate for his midlife crisis, meaning that the comic was written by this Frank Miller instead of this Frank Miller. Funny how it ended up coming out the same time as Crisis on Infinite Earths, Watchmen and The Killing Joke, so all these stories could probably be seen as having unintentionally supported each other. Anyway, back in 1986, DC didn't have the Elseworlds imprint yet, so The Dark Knight Returns was not seen as an Elseworlds story until much later, and some people may have before that assumed that this story was the end for Batman's career. Well, that didn't last long with how the status quo eventually evolved along with the Batman family, but that is something better to be said for the review part after the story commentary. As my format should foreshadow, The Dark Knight Returns was adapted as a two-parter animated movie, with part 1 coming out when I was serving my time in the Finnish Defense Force in 2012, and part 2 came out in 2013 when I entered the reserves. The new Batman Adventures also had an episode that paid a homage to the comic, but before I get to talking about either of those, let's do some commentary on the Batman story that is still seen as some of Frank Miller's best work. As the story is quite large in going over 4 books, this comparison review has also been divided into 2 videos, for the same reason why the adaptation was also cut in 2. Here are the time codes for where the 2 books in the video start, here is where the review for them is, and here is where the comparison to part 1 movie starts. Book 1. The Dark Knight Returns starts with a cold opening introduction to the old man Bruce Wayne, in establishing how he is chasing the thrills of his youth in race car driving. The story then transitions into the news coverage going from his near-death experience in the racetrack to how Gotham is currently going through a heat wave, which is agitating a local gang of mutants, as well as how we are getting closer to the retirement of Commissioner James Gordon, who is about to turn 70, and how Batman has not been seen for a decade.
Tonight also marks the 10th anniversary of the last sighting of the Batman. Most of our younger viewers now think of him as a myth. Many others still debate whether his one-man war on crime was right or wrong. But this reporter hopes that wherever he is, he's enjoying a toast.
More or less the reason why the story can all be set in during the 80s. Bruce and Commissioner Gordon are then shown having a drink and reminiscing about the old better days, with Bruce also mentioning how he has not spoken to his still living former ward Dick for 7 years after Jason Todd died. After then going their separate ways, Bruce walks driven by the thoughts of his passive lifestyle and is eventually brought to the crime alley, formerly known as Park Row, where his parents were killed decades ago. There Bruce is then ambushed by those mutant gang members whom he mentally compares to his parents' killer. But being ready to fight back against them scares the mutants to flee away, and causes Bruce to realize that Joe Chill was a lesser criminal than them in just having wanted to steal for a living, while the mutants were more willing to kill him for sport. This is confirmed by the news later reporting that the mutants went to kill someone else in Bruce's place, which transitions us through the heatwave weather report to Arkham home for emotionally troubled, to show us a catatonic Joker, and Harvey Dent, whose face has been surgically fixed with the support of his psychiatrist, Dr. Bartholomew Volper, and Surgeon Dr. Herbert Willing. Only one of those 2 is important in going forward, and Harvey's recovery from having been Two-Face makes the news, with Commissioner Gordon and Bruce also being interviewed about their past working relationship with Harvey.
We must believe we can all defeat our own private demons.
Bruce talking about defeating one's private demons transitions us to him having a flashback dream that has since been adapted by both Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder on how he had originally found the Batcave as a young boy when his parents were still alive. Waking up, Bruce finds himself standing naked on the stairs leading down to his old Batcave, with the elderly Alfred catching up to him, discovering that Bruce has shaven off his mustache. In transitioning us to Bruce's next scene, we have another news segment talking about Harvey having gone missing, while some of Two-Face's old goons are approached by a bandaged man. Back to the Wayne Manor. We have Bruce watching the television as well when The Mark of Zorro, the movie he had gone to see with his parents before they died, airs on TV. Despite what memories are brought to him by it, Bruce still chooses to watch it, but then his PTSD hits him and causes Bruce to relive the night when his parents died, with changing the channels only showing him more and more bad news until he shuts his TV.
You try to hold me back, but you're weak. You know it in your soul. Nothing but a hollow shell. A rusty trap. The time has come.
But so far, the psychological damage has been done, and while listening to phone messages from his friends, like Harvey, Clark Kent and Selina Kyle, Bruce relives the moment from his youth when Batman was truly born. As storm falls in Gotham, there is also a power outage that gives the dangerous people in town cover to do whatever they want. But that respite they have enjoyed for the previous decade is over. In the next scene, we witness an apathetic taxi driver being paid by an abusive pimp to drive him and his female employee somewhere. But the cab never leaves anywhere, while the cabbie's bribe is torn to shreds. And next we see the breakout character of this book being confronted with her friend by the mutants while trying to hold out the rain at a 1980s arcade. But once again, those actions are not allowed anymore, as even the news starts to pick up on this phenomena with the sightings, of which we then get a taste of through the eyes of these two patrolmen.
We're in for a show, kid.
And so this 55-year-old man has come to reclaim his youth, while being seen as a monster before causing a fleeing car to crash into the ruins of an abandoned building and telling the pursuing officers,
"These men are mine."
With some struggles in climbing a rope, Batman eventually manages to take out the criminals one by one, while the distraction of the younger patrol officer causes him to choose the painful disarming move out of the 6 other moves on the remaining one.
You're under arrest, mister! You just crippled that man!
He's young, he'll walk again. But you'll stay scared, won't you, punk?
Thanks to the older patrol officer, Batman has to work in peace to find a coin with both sides scarred, and tells them to pass a message to Commissioner Gordon on how they need to talk. As Batman has now been making his presence more known, the news of his return are carried to the catatonic Joker, who speaks for the first time in years.
Batman, darling.
The news cycle talking about Batman's resumed crusade has by now sparked a debate where Lana Lang of all people is speaking in his favor on his actions, while providing a quote for a future movie.
It's a 3-syllable word for any thought too big for little minds.
At the GCPD, Commissioner Gordon is passively ignoring the lawyer of the criminal Batman disarmed in a painful way, and after having managed to find matches to light a cigarette, has the release papers drawn up for the wounded perp's lawyer, before making a phone call to Bruce, who is getting a chiropractic massage from Alfred. In transitioning to the next scene, we are introduced to the leader of the mutant gang, who has sent a video message to the news.
"We will kill the old man, Gordon.
We will chop him. We will grind him. We will bathe in his blood. I myself will kill the fool Batman. I will rip the meat from his bones and suck them dry. Don't call us a gang. Don't call us criminals. We are the law. Gotham City belongs to the mutants.
Before Batman is shown confronting the released perp whom he had followed to what used to be his boss's hideout. The already wounded perp backs away from Batman, passively questioning him on the plans of his boss, whom Batman suspects being Harvey Dent, and ends up falling backwards through the window in getting even more wounded while claiming to have rights.
Sure, you've got rights. Plenty of them. You're also bleeding to death. And right now, I'm the only one in the world who can get you to a hospital in time.
While this nameless perp tells Batman what he wants to know, one of those girls Batman saved earlier sees the bat signal being turned on for the first time in years, with Batman and Commissioner Gordon soon discussing what he was able to learn from the perp. So far, Batman's suspicions seems to have been confirmed about Harvey Dent having returned back to crime, when his next move is being described as
Twice as big as anyone can imagine.
While the pieces are clicking in Batman's head in realizing what that means, Harvey's former psychiatrist Dr. Wolper is interviewed slandering Batman, and the Joker is visited by one of his former goons to report about Harvey having ordered bombs from him.
What kind of bombs?
Back to Batman, who has figured out that Harvey's plans have something to do with the two towers that the bat signal was signed at earlier, which is proven to be right when two armed helicopters fly past the tower he has perched onto. While climbing himself to a better vantage point to switch buildings, one of the two helicopters shoots at the other building, and Batman is forced to hurry by using a chemical weapon to deal with the goons on the roof before inspecting the landed helicopter to find a bomb inside. While dealing with the bomb by freezing it, the bandaged Harvey Dent takes over the airways from the other tower and demands $5 million in the next 20 minutes or the towers go down. Batman responds as quickly as he can to fire a line to make his way there, but is shot by the gunman, only to be saved by the padding on his chest symbol, and in falling manages to fire on another lifeline to keep himself in the air. But then, as the bandaged Harvey is also shooting at Batman, he falls, and Batman, needing to know if he truly is Harvey, catches him in sending them both to tumble into the building as the helicopter flies away to blow up with the gunman inside.
You think?
Cut it out. Just look at me and have your laugh. Get it over with. At least both sides match now, right? Look at me and have your laugh. Who are we kidding? They couldn't fix me. Nothing can change what I am.
In seeing Harvey now as a reflection of himself, Batman embraces him in an empathetic hug as Book 1 ends. Book 2. The Dark Knight Triumph opens with Commissioner Gordon being ambushed in a kill-or-be-killed situation on his way home by a member of the mutant gang whom he recognized to be underaged. In thinking back to his wife Sarah, waiting for him to come home, Gordon defends himself and survives the encounter.
One moment, I've just been handed this. Commissioner James Gordon has been shot and killed. Wait, I read that wrong. Commissioner Gordon has shot and killed a 17-year-old mutant.
In transitioning as the story goes forward, we hear more news reports talking about Batman's influence on Gotham's youth, and that young girl Batman saved in the previous book now having bought herself a Robin costume to go out in, and almost regretting it.
Some Robin.
The news talk more about Commissioner Gordon having survived another attempt on his life, with the mutant leader having sent another threat message to be aired on TV.
We will kill the old man Gordon. We will chop him. We will grind him. We will bathe in his blood. I myself will kill the fool Batman. I will rip the meat from his bones and suck them dry. Don't call us a gang. Don't call us criminals. We are the law. Gotham City belongs to the mutants.
Then the news talks more about how the mutant gang has kidnapped a 10-month-old baby, whose rescue is another signature scene in the comic, and of which I will talk in proper detail later.
Back up or kill her! Really, man, don't do it!
I believe you.
The next following pages showcase more news debates for and against Batman's activities, while the young girl in Robin costume is practicing and getting better at free running on the roofs. After that, Batman is shown in a properly built-up sequence on how to interrogate a mutant gang member for what they are planning, while the other mutants are shown committing a slow-burn murder, which transitions us to Batman having moved on in his investigation on the mutants to where they have been getting their firepower, from a blackmailed US Army general. While Batman goes to get himself the required tools to go after them, the young girl as Robin learns where the mutants are gathering, and the city executives are discussing on who will replace Gordon after his retirement as the police commissioner. It is going to be a younger police captain, Ellen Yindel, who looks like a younger version of Gordon without the mustache. Then we get the other signature scene from the comic, as Batman confronts the mutants and their leader at the city dump with the tank version of the Batmobile.
Mutants, surrender now or be destroyed.
And the mutants attack back at Batman without their leader even telling them to which Batman responds by firing back with
Rubber bullets. Honest.
The mutant leader then calls out Batman to come face him outside of his Batmobile/tank by yelling at its turrets at the point-blank distance, which Batman acknowledges would be a too easy way to take him out, but would also make the mutant leader a martyr to the mutants. Acknowledging the risk of facing a much younger opponent, Batman jumps out of the Batmobile/tank to fight the mutant leader, in what turns out to be as one-sided fight as he predicted it would be, as the mutant leader is younger and a much faster fighter than him, in getting beaten up to the point where he starts to have a mental conversation with a Robin who is not there, only to be ironically rescued by a Robin who is there, in distracting the mutant leader enough for him to throw a gas bomb at his opponent before the Robin drags his still alive remains back to the Batmobile/tank. As it drives away with her trying to patch him up, we hear how the GCPD has collected those mutants and their leader into custody from the news, and see an obscured conversation happening in the White House, which is summarized as the President of the United States telling Superman to be ready to talk with Batman. Back in the Batmobile/tank, the Robin has managed to patch Batman well enough back together that he is now lucid enough to carry a conversation and ask for her name.
Carrie Kelly. Robin.
Mine's Bruce.
Sir, you are delirious. You should stay quiet from now on. We're moments from the hospital.
No, Alfred, no hospital. The cave. And Robin comes with us.
Meanwhile, in the Arkham home, Dr. Wolper is negotiating for the Joker's release as his next breakthrough recovered patient, and only doubles down when the Joker gaslights him in pretending to be remorseful for his crimes. At the Batcave, Bruce walks away from Carrie and Alfred to find himself again.
Where are you? I'm not finished yet. And you're not finished with me. You're never finished with me.
While Bruce is going through that and Carrie is admiring Jason Todd's Robin costume, the news report how the mayor is going to approach the incarcerated mutant leader in open discussion, and this mentally ill conspiracy nut opens fire in an adult movie theater. More news I am not going to describe is reported before we are shown how those negotiations between the mayor and mutant leader go, based on the look on Gordon's face and his inner monologue. But on the plus side, Bruce allows Carrie to be his new Robin from now, in acknowledging his need for a younger partner, as well as the risk of having her on the same path as Jason Todd was. As the new dynamic duo, Batman and Robin set off with plans to only have Carrie do minimum contact with the mutants while disguised as one of them, so she can spread the word among the gang to gather where Batman wants them to. At the same time, Ellen Yindel, Gordon's upcoming replacement, approaches the police commissioner to talk about his working relationship in supporting Batman. Gordon, being as old as he is, and the story being set in the 1980s, tells Yindel about how he was a young man during the time when the United States joined World War II after Pearl Harbor happened.
Mostly we all lie. Make it sound like we leapt to our feet and went after the Axis the second it happened. Truth is, we were scared stiff. Rumors were flying. We barely had an army. Hell, we were hiding in our beds with our heads under the sheets. And then we heard President Roosevelt on the radio. That voice, strong and sure, taking our fear and turning it into a fighting spirit. He's why we won that war. Later, this report came out that Roosevelt might have known Pearl Harbor was coming and let it happen. That rattled around in my head for days. How horrible it would be if it were true. Then again, it's what got us into the war. A lot of men died, but in the end, it saved millions. I bounced back and forth like that until I realized it was too big for me to judge. He was too big.
Except that Yindel is not bright enough to see through that allegory, where Gordon compares Batman to President Roosevelt. Right after that, Gordon is meeting Batman by the bat signal for what will be the last time, as they look at the mutants having gathered all at one location, and Batman asks Gordon not to get involved with what he is going to do with them, as his last favor to him. This last favor includes Gordon going to say goodbye to the mutant leader in his cell, before leaving his door open and having Batman lure him to escape through the air vents to the pipeline, leading to the location where Batman and Robin have lured all the mutants to bear witness.
Batman! Show yourself! Face me, fool, and I will kill you! I will show you who rules Gotham City!
Okay, son. Show me.
And so they battle in round 2, with Batman fighting smarter and dirtier than in round 1 against the mutant leader, in front of his own gang to be humiliated, as Batman no longer holds back with his ruthlessness.
You don't get it, son. This isn't a mud hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon.
Well, Batman managed to take out the mutant gang by humiliating their leader in combat. And of course, people like Dr. Wolver decided to weaponize it in his smear campaign against Batman to make his patients look more like victims. Gordon leaves his office as the police commissioner while thinking about his wife Sarah to get through all this, and Bruce Wayne is sinking deeper into the depths of Batman's psyche.
Like it was yesterday.
Let's go over the art in the story first. In these first 2 books, Frank Miller was aided by Klaus Jansson drawing over his own drawing style, which compared to when Jansson stops drawing over Miller show what the difference really is. With Jansson working on the art early in the characters and backgrounds, the story has a strong beginning as it went forward to the panels where Miller was working alone, and if you didn't know about Jansson's contribution to the art, the transition from 2 artists to just one is almost seamless. The coloring is done by Lynn Varley, with whom Frank Miller was married at the time, and whose efforts in coloring the book vary here and there. Sometimes there are scenes that are colored properly, and then there are scenes that seem to emulate grey noir style in being 90% black and white. Also, those scenes that are properly colored have what I believe to be best described as a faded tone, which does provide the needed impact when contrasted with stronger colors highlighting strong lights and explosions. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it raises some questions, like with this panel. And now let's talk about the story in these first 2 books. As an old man Batman story set 10 years after his retirement due to Robin's death, and surprisingly having come out 3 years before a death in the family where Jason Todd died, The Dark Knight Returns opens by presenting Bruce Wayne living a half-life with how he has managed to substitute his Batman activities, which have clearly been repressed to the point where his return comes across as cathartic. The rise of the mutant gang started to pull Bruce's need to be Batman closer to the surface, while re-watching the same movie Bruce had watched with his parents before their deaths, then reawakened Batman in Bruce's psyche again. Harvey Dent seemingly returning back to crime after his recovery then served both as another justification for Batman coming back, but also as a parallel to the balancing act between Bruce and Batman as the story goes forward. Because fixing his face did not make the Two-Face personality go away, but rather take over Harvey's psyche. And in going forward with the rest of the story, the same thing seems to be happening with Bruce as his Batman side keeps taking over his psyche as the dominant personality. That is why Batman likely said that he sees a reflection when looking back at Harvey at the end of Book 1. Then with Book 2, Frank Miller seemed to be making his version of the statement on how Batman needs a Robin. At the very least, to watch his back and do things that he himself can't do. But the implication could also be that Robin's presence has a more positive effect on Batman's psyche, more or less as a parental figure, which unfortunately most modern writers have overdone to the point of making the mainstream Batman come across like an abusive parent. I need to talk more about that when I focus on the latter two books, but as it was shown in the scenes before they met, Robin's absence had caused Batman to speak in his inner monologue to someone who was not there. And then let's talk about this hostage situation now. There is some clear pragmatism in having Batman first send in what looks like an actual giant bat to intimidate the three mutants, who in trying to deal with the pest animal end up killing one of their own. I could understand that Batman's intentions were to get the mutants on the edge, and this was an end result he probably didn't see coming. A similar thing happened with Batman's first scene with the cops and Two-Face's goons. Whereas his next move in coming through the wall and taking this huge machine gun rifle from the other mutant could be read as disarming the more dangerous opponent and minimizing risks in the situation. Then there is the remaining mutant, holding the 10-month-old hostage at gunpoint, to which Batman is forced to respond in the heat of the moment reaction speed, which leads him to shooting at the... where exactly? The way how this panel is drawn and colored makes the implication be that Batman fired at the mutant holding the hostage somewhere above Hannon's left side, with this blood spatter below the bullet hole in the wall further implicating that the gunshot did flesh damage. The shades on the mutant's head are intact and there are no wounds on Hannon's head or clothes. But then there is also how the upper half of the panel is in black and white while the lower half has colors. That on its own should make it clear that Batman shot the mutant dead in having rather prioritized on the safety of the 10-month-old hostage. However, the following news coverage commenting on Batman's activities never brings up that he took someone's life while rescuing the 10-month-old hostage. The logical conclusion could so be that Batman either got lucky with a non-lethal shoulder shot, or the media and the police do not give a about the lives of the mutants. Feel free to debate which one is what more likely happened in the comment section, as I bring up with this image from my 2-year-old video about updating Batman's no-kill rule, and how Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice the Ultimate Edition did this scene somewhat better and clearer, by having Batfleck have time to aim and choose the non-lethal target to shoot at when rescuing Ma Kent from Anatoly Knaizev, who then ended up blowing himself up in not realizing that it could happen with his flamethrower tank damaged. Ultimately, after Robin has saved Batman from the mutant leader, his mentality goes through something that is better to be talked about in the part 2 video. but can be summarized in how it makes the balancing act between Bruce and Batman to dip more to the Batman being the more dominant personality in his psyche. The speed at which it happens depends on the circumstances and Robin's positive influence in Bruce's presence. And I will also talk more about Carrie Kelly as Robin in part 2, in wanting to reflect on her role in the full story, not just the first half of it. When moving towards the animated movies that adapted the comic book in 2012 and 2013, I should first acknowledge the new Batman Adventures episode Legends of the Dark Knight, which adapted a few scenes from book 2, and to go over that, I decided to ask a proper expert to talk about it.
Thanks for having me. So to say that Legends of the Dark Knight is an adaptation of The Dark Knight Returns is overselling it a little. In reality, this episode is a glorious celebration of several different Batman eras, and also makes a pretty dismissive remark about the Batman films of the time by mocking director Joel Schumacher. The episode takes the form of an anthology, as 3 children walk the streets of Gotham talking about what they think the Batman is like. The first story, as told by the youngster Matt, who heard it from his security guard uncle, is a love letter to the classic Dick Sprang era of the comics, complete with oversized props and cheesy one-liners. The second boy believes Batman to be some sort of bat creature with wings that preys on evildoers. Perhaps he was thinking of Kirk Langstrom. What's more relevant to this video is the second story told by the girl Carrie, and it is essentially a near perfect shot-for-shot adaptation of a segment of The Dark Knight Returns. This segment was storyboarded by the late Darwin Cook, perhaps best known for his work on Justice League New Frontier and Batman Ego. And he really pulls off blending the DCAU art style with Frank Miller's. Rather than being voiced by Kevin Conroy, this Batman is voiced by Michael Ironside, a man with an appropriately gravelly voice. Also well known for playing Sam Fisher in the Splinter Cell series. We get an equally strong performance from prolific voice actor Kevin Michael Richardson as the mutant leader. What's most impressive about this section of the episode is how perfectly it encapsulates the look of the Dark Knight Returns comic. Not just in terms of the character models, but the colour tone as well. It literally looks like the comic has come to life. As much as I would have loved to have heard the whole operating table speech being performed by Conroy, his Batman was a more compassionate and caring one. So it might have sounded a little odd to hear him talk about systematically breaking the mutant leader's bones. Although his more cold and brutal performance worked pretty well in Arkham Knight. This whole section doesn't begin until 10 minutes into the episode, and only lasts for 5 minutes. But what a tantalizing taste it was. You have to remember that when this episode first aired in the dark days of the late 1990s, we didn't have all of the literal adaptations that we have now. We could only imagine what our favourite comic book stories would have looked and sounded like in animation form. We'd have to wait nearly 15 years before we'd get a fully faithful adaptation of Miller's legendary miniseries.
Wow, 15 years. I went through preschool, elementary school, 7th to 9th grades, and high school during that time. Anyway, that was Serum Lake, who has been doing in-depth video essays on Batman the Animated Series episodes and character studies, and has also expanded to Superman the Animated Series as well as Batman the Caped Crusader. Those videos are everything my videos are not in the best sense possible. They are shorter, more condensed, and they are released more frequently than my stuff. If this video is how you first learned about Serum Lake, then the YouTube algorithm has failed you even worse than how it is keeping my channel from being found. Go check out his channel after I get done talking about the animated movie next. Directed by Jay Oliva and written by Bob Goodman? The same Bob Goodman who wrote Superman Unbound. Okay then. On the surface, the Part 1 movie adapting the first 2 books does a serviceable job, but with the animation style replicating Frank Miller's and Klaus Jansson's combined art style. And in its premise, it is clear that Oliva and Goodman understood their assignment in retelling the story from point A to point B, while points C and D come later in the Part 2 movie. The movie is essentially told scene to scene as it went in the source material, but unlike how it was done in Batman Year 1, the narrations via inner monologue have been removed and repurposed as dialogue exchange.
Just remembering a promise, Alfred.
Which was?
Never again.
And those that are not are then presented in the show don't tell method, which I do approve as the better alternative in culling out the excessive amounts of inner monologues. And it is definitely a better idea to show Batman being old enough to need his legs to climb a rope than have him mentally exposit that. However, the complete lack of it is disturbing when it comes to the scenes where they showcase the mental state of a character. Like in the beginning where Bruce is confronted by the mutants at Crime Alley and compares them to Joe Chill. Or when he chooses to watch the movie that then triggers his PTSD of the night when his parents died. I think those specifically were important enough thoughts that should have been included in the retelling of the story. Then there is this monologue from Bruce when he is properly shown for the first time as Batman, of which I am not sure if it would have been as important, or if it is presented well enough in being shown through Batman's actions. And another example of omitted inner monologue is in this part, where Batman has to think on his feet to get the younger patrol officer out of danger, before ending up choosing the painful defense out of the 7 others, 3 that can kill and 3 that will disarm with minimum contact, to deal with the remaining criminal. Outside of that nitpick, the Part 1 movie does somewhat good job in retelling the story of the comic, and I do think the chosen cast was also good, except that Michael Ironside, who voiced this version of Batman in the Legends of the Dark Knight episode, would have probably been a better choice to bring back to voice Batman than Peter Weller. Or maybe the voice direction with him was a rush job with some takes, because I'm pretty sure this line,
"These men are mine,"
should have been yelled with a more raised voice and
"Okay, son, show me,"
sounds more hasty when compared to Michael Ironside's version.
"Okay, son, show me."
Ironside also delivered this line better.
"You don't get it, son. This isn't a trash heap. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon."
"You don't get it, son. This isn't a mud hole. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon."
The rest of the cast is somewhat better with David Selby as Commissioner Gordon.
A lot of men died, but in the end it saved millions. I bounced back and forth like that until I realized it was too big for me to judge.
Ariel Winter as Carrie Kelly Robin.
Didn't suck.
Some other guy named Michael Jackson as Alfred.
If it's suicide you're after, I have an old family recipe. It's slow and painful. You'd like it.
Wade Williams as Harvey Dent.
I can't express enough gratitude to my plastic surgeon, Dr. Herbert Willing, and my psychiatrist, Dr. Bartholomew Walper, people of Gotham. This is Harvey Dent.
At least both sides match now, right? Look at me and have your laugh.
Gary Anthony Williams as the mutant leader.
They call us a gang. They think we just noisy kids. Only when they die by our hands will they know Gotham City belongs to the mutants!
And Michael McKean as Dr. Wolper.
Picture the public psyche as a vast, moist membrane. Batman has struck this membrane a vicious blow, and it has recoiled. Hence the misleading short-term statistics.
Ja haistahan who also voiced the 50s Joker in that TNBA episode, by the way.
Mother always said I had talent.
The movie also sets up Maria Canals as Ellen Yindel.
I'm reporting for duty.
You're a few days early, Captain.
Any duty, sir.
And Michael Emerson as the Joker.
Batman. Darling.
these other people are so used well enough that their presence does not come across as flawed as with Peter Weller as the more focused on main character. Okay, and now let's rush through the few changes that the movie has similarly like I originally did with Batman Year 1. Number 1. Likely for modesty reasons, Bruce is not shown naked in the Batcave when Alfred discovers him having shaven off his mustache, in having him be shown wearing boxer briefs. Number 2. Dr. Wolper is given a different mustache, so he no longer looks like Adolf with an afro. Number 3. Harvey is only told of having gone missing and the scene of him approaching his old gang wearing bandages is cut. Number 4. The phone messages from Harvey, Clark and Selina are cut, likely because only one of those characters was voiced by this point. Number 5. The Joker coming out of his coma is moved from after Batman has made his returned presence known in the comic to the cliffhanger of the movie as it ends. Number 6. While Gordon is ignoring the lawyer of the perp Batman wounded critically, he is instead looking for his nicotine gum instead of his cigarettes. Number 7. Since the Joker coming out of his coma was moved into being a cliffhanger, we don't have him talking with Abner is his name, about what kind of bombs Harvey could have ordered from him, and that is why I had Robert read that line from when we went over the comic on his channel.
Hey guys, welcome to another lesson of Pro Teachers Do. Today with me once again, Pika Shades.
Hey, and I'll be writing notes.
Yep, today we're going to be going over The Dark Knight Returns.
Number 8. When Harvey makes his on-air demand to not blow up the towers, he asks for
$22 million.
Instead of $5 million and excusing it being because he has bills to pay. Number 9. Batman does not give Harvey an empathetic hug after having stopped his suicide mission. Number 10. Gordon's assassination attempt is framed better to show where it is happening. A convenience store that also sells Swamp Thing, Sandman, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Watchmen comics. Number 11. The kidnapped child is changed into being a 2-year-old instead of a 10-month-old. Probably because a hostage that young would have been too much. Number 12. Whereas the kidnap rescue scene goes beat for beat pretty much the same, the movie decides to set up a definitive answer on where Batman shot the remaining mutant kidnapper, aka to Hannon Gunhand to disarm Hannett before taking Hannett out and rescuing the 2-year-old. I would like to say that is a fair compromise to make. If Adam and Jamie had not busted that movie myth 3 years before this movie came out in Mythbusters.
Shooting a gun out of a hand in a shootout position. 3, 2, 1.
Right there. You seeing it? Well, I know that we hit our gun. Because that's a piece of it. Let's go inspect. Dude, you see where I hit this? This is behind the chamber. In order to knock this out, I had to have fired down the cylinder.
Pretty good shooting there, Tex.
An interesting trick shot. But because the bullet didn't get full purchase on the gun, perhaps not ideal for this test.
You still didn't let it go.
No, I don't think I was putting too much pressure on it. I don't think I'm clenching.
And that just leaves Jamie.
Yeah, I held on to it. I mean, it's funny. It shocks you the same way the others do, but it pushes itself deeper into your hand.
Well, the gun is built to take force in exactly that direction. I think of all the shooting positions, this one's the least likely to be knocked out of your hand.
It's clear from our testing that shooting a gun out of somebody's hand should be your very last option. For one thing, that gun is a tiny target, and you pretty much have to hit it on a bullseye to have any effect.
So if you do ever find yourself in a Western duel, know this. You might be able to shoot the gun out of someone's hand, but chances are someone's gonna get hurt.
Number 13. This woman's cruel death by the mutants is cut. Number 14. As a way to keep turning Batman's inner monologue into spoken dialogue.
If it's war they want, I've got just the thing.
This panel of exposition is turned into a scene of Batman confronting the US Army general who sold weapons to the mutants and explaining his reasoning being that his superiors wouldn't pay for his dying wife's treatments. And since the panel has the general dead, the movie implies that he took his own life after Batman leaves. Number 15. Since most of the inner monologue is omitted, it takes the mutant leader to notice that the Batmobile/tank is firing
rubber bullets.
Otherwise, the confrontation at the dump goes pretty much the same as in the comic, outside of Batman also not shooting the torch out of the mutant leader's hand during his speech. Number 16. When Carrie comes to Batman's rescue as Robin, Batman uses a glue grenade on the mutant leader when he is distracted, and after that we see Carrie help Batman back to the Batmobile/tank to explain how a small girl at her age managed to carry this mass of an old man muscle there. Number 17. The obscure conversation between President Ronald Reagan and Superman is cut and moved into the Part 2 movie. Number 18. This conspiracy not opening fire in an adult movie theater has been cut out as the unneeded filler it was. Number 19. This weird hug scene between naked Bruce and Carrie when he accepts her as Robin is also cut, and I think that it is for the better. Number 20. We get to see how the mutant leader kills the mayor instead of just Gordon's reaction to it. Number 21. Batman does not lead the mutant leader to the pipe in his escape from the GCPD, but that is compensated with some new dialogue that he says during their fight.
You're weak, old man! You're slow!
True, but we're all slow when we're thigh-deep in mud.
What was that?
Just the right kind of cut above the eyes. The kind that bleeds.
That a tickle?
That was a nerve bundle in your deltoid. Might not have hurt, but you won't be moving that arm for a while.
Which are again repurposed from Batman's inner monologue during the fight. Number 21. The two scenes of Gordon retiring from his position as the police commissioner and Bruce relating to a howling wolf have been welded together into them having a phone call conversation to compensate for all this inner monologue. That also changes the context of the weight Gordon has carried over having broken the rules for Batman over the years, before thinking back to his wife to make it easier, and Bruce barely acknowledging the sacrifice that Gordon has done for him. I would like to imagine that the movie attempted to have a less tragic tone to end here, before showing the Joker coming out of his coma as the cliffhanger. And that is how Part 1 movie compares to Books 1 and 2, in a rather flawed, not perfect, but close enough way. When it comes to moving on to covering Books 3 and 4 being adapted in the Part 2 movie, I have already written the story commentary for both books, which was before I decided to cut this project into 2 videos. So after working through writing the review on the comic part and watching the Part 2 movie before covering it, I don't think it will take that much time for me to get the next video going over the latter half of The Dark Knight Returns done. Still, as we have now entered the spooky season of October, I will also be doing some gameplay streams on spook games, like finishing my New Game Plus run on the Dead Space remake before moving on to the Resident Evil 2 remake. But as we are now at the end of the video, I need to give last special thanks to Serum Lake for having collaborated with me in covering how The Dark Knight Returns was paid a homage to in the new Batman Adventures Legends of the Dark Knight episode. Also, thank you to Robert Willing who helped me properly go over the comic on his channel earlier this year. Both of their channels are linked down in the description. And now I leave to work on the Part 2 video, so while you wait for it to come out, remember to like this video, comment what thoughts you have about the comic and its impact on Batman's mythology, share this video for more people to see, and subscribe for when the Part 2 video comes out. Also ding the bell to be alerted for when my gaming streams happen, and may your heart be your guiding key.